Thanks for joining us here on Dice Gazers. I'm Zexist, and I'm joined here by Leggett. He's our
Hello, everyone.
co-host. Dice Gazers is role-playing fans discussing all the different aspects of role-playing. This is going to be season 1 of Dice Gazers, and it's going to focus on Rifts. Today, we're going to talk about the rules of Rifts. Rifts is a sci-fi post-apocalyptic setting with magic, there's psionics, high technology, post-apocalyptic survival game that's evolved for new players or returning players. There's a lot to unpack here. To avoid getting overwhelmed, I like to say just simplify things. It's best for players to break down the game into a more, simple setting, simple storylines, and keeping character balance similar for all your characters or all your players when you're making a game, when you're making adventures, can really help you to maintain that balance and to simplify things. Game balance is often rather challenging to maintain in Rifts, as we can quickly run into power creep with either NPCs, supernatural monsters, creatures of magic. They can just easily wipe out a team. As a survival game, it's actually rather expected. And with the setting of Rifts specifically, if you really look at it, death should be really calm. However, we are playing a game and we are here to have fun. So let's not just kill our players off willy-nilly. That's not what we want to do. Rift's character creation can be exhausting and really involved. A lot of people, even myself, I know that a lot of times it takes me hours to create a character. So let's discuss basic game rules. The dice system that Palladium Rifts uses is a D20 system. D20s are typically combat dice with anything lower than a D20 also being involved in combat. Anything skill-based is generally just D100. Combat is broken down into melee and ranged. Melee combat generally revolves around hand-to-hand and ancient weapons. Now, ancient weapons being knives, swords, axes, pole arms, thrown items, and even archery. Ranged combat can include archery, obviously, and often does, depending on how you specifically are playing, but then also includes ballistic weapons like we have in modern day, including energy weapons, and then missiles, explosives, all that stuff. Combat order, however, is first determined through initiative, which is common for just about every game, and that is also rolled with a D20. Players and GM roll their D20 to determine the combat and then add bonuses. Now, something I want to discuss about bonuses, we're trying to simplify things. What I recommend is just roll a dice. If it's a high number, oftentimes you're just going to win. And then if things happen to be really close, you're like, I'm not sure, then you can go ahead and figure out what your bonuses are. But don't waste time trying to find your bonuses. Just roll the dice and then go from there. That's the best way to simplify that. Okay, so melee combat. So to determine action, characters have a set number of actions that is essentially set by their hand-to-hand combat skill. And was it Rift's Ultimate Edition? I can't remember, Leggett, where they made that change that used to be 2 attacks per.
I don't remember. No, it was originally 2 in the older games, and at some point they changed it to 4 attacks. So you start off with a base 2, and then with the hand-to-hand you get, if it's basic, expert, or martial arts, you get an additional 2 actions, or assassin, you get just the 1. But then you get a new one at level 2. And then boxing would add an extra attack. We can get into that later.
If the player needs to draw a weapon, usually they have to take an action to draw the weapon, and then no further actions possible. So on the next action, a roll to strike is done, and it usually, it's a D20, applying applicable strike bonuses. With ancient weapons, a strike roll of 5 or greater is a hit, and then you add your bonuses to the value rolled on the D20. And if greater than 5, the target victim's hit. But they do get, the victim gets to parry or dodge. Okay, so tie goes to the defender, and that's pretty common with every game. But if your to strike roll is higher than their parry or dodge, then you hit, and then the appropriate damage is rolled. So if they fail to parry, obviously the player rolls damage. And so a typical damage number for, say, a vibro sword is 2d6, and then you add the combined value of the damage from the individual's weapon, and then if you have a strength stat of 16 or higher, then there's an additional damage bonus there that you may apply. Now,
not with supernatural, not with NPC weapons, only
that's
with
true.
Yeah.
just with SDC. Okay, so parry rolls do not apply in action. Dodges, however, do. Now, what I mean by that is that if you take an action to dodge, then your next action is essentially forfeited because your action was to dodge. Whereas a parry is something that you can always do in melee combat. The only exception to the dodge rule is if you happen to have auto dodge, which comes on juicers or
Crazies.
crazies or some specific martial arts or hand-to-hand combat, like hand-to-hand combat commando gives you auto dodge at a higher level. And those have specific bonuses that apply to auto dodge only and not dodge. Now, combat then progresses until one side either forfeits, is incapacitated, or what have you. And let's talk realism for a second. If you're being realistic, nobody stays in a fight until they're dead. Really. That's actually rare. War aside, right? But when we're doing adventures, it's not often a war scene. It's just a street fight, so to speak. And most people are just going to run from a street fight eventually, at least. So a natural 20, this is something a natural 20 is an automatic critical strike and does double damage. However, a natural 1 is not an automatic failure in Rift. Many of us are very used to doing that, and we just think that that's how all games are, but it's not actually listed in the Rift's rule setting that a 1 is an automatic failure. And so you can use it that way if you want. You can, homebrew that. So to beat a critical strike, opponents have to roll a natural 20 as well to either parry it or dodge it on their dice. Now, the only exception to that is if they have a natural ability to negate critical strike. Next thing we have is called shots. Players can, you can make I want to hit him in the face. I want to hit him in the hand, whatever. I want to knock his gun out of his hand, right? Players can call a specific target and then they try applying their damage to that. It does increase the difficulty, but regardless of the target location, players do need to roll a 12 or higher to strike that location. But a failed parry or dodge will still result in the opponent being struck in the location that was called for that strike.
So with the called shots, well, first off, if you're targeting a weapon, that's a disarm. So there's an actual maneuver that martial artists will get with a disarm that has its own bonus. The second part is if you fail to roll the target number, which is 12 or higher, you still hit the target. You still hit your opponent. You just don't do what it is that you're trying to do. So if you're trying to punch them in the jaw to break their glass jaw, and your bonus applied to your dice roll is 11, you actually just punch them in the chest or something like that. You missed the jaw entirely, but they failed to parry the shot. So as long as you rolled a 5 or higher, you're going to hit your target if they don't parry you.
Okay, now as with melee, ranged combat actions are still resolved with a d20. Players roll to strike just like normal and then apply strike bonuses. Players need to roll against an 8 to strike with ranged weapons. Okay, so it's a 12 for a called shot, but an 8 for any normal ranged shot. And as like it said, if you roll a 12 and or roll an 11, you don't get the called shot, but you still do hit main body. Okay, now opponents can choose to dodge a ranged attack. However, if it's like a laser weapon, most any ranged weapon though is going to have some sort of negative penalty to trying to dodge it, which is at least a -8. Oftentimes it's a -10 because of the high-tech weapons that most people are using. And then without the benefit of a dodge bonus, so for ranged weapons, for ranged weapon attacks closer than 500 feet, that's where it is. Targets are -10 to dodge without the benefit of any sort of dodge bonus. Okay. Ranged attacks cannot be parried unless otherwise stated in your OCC or RCC. So auto dodge does allow that. Auto dodge rules for juicers, crazies like we spoke about previously, other OCCs and RCCs with auto dodge. They do gain the bonus to their dodge, effectively decreasing the penalty. +2 to auto dodge, we'll see the crazy roll a -6 to dodge a ranged attack, but the act doesn't cost the character an action Players can rely on cover to protect themselves from ranged combat. The rules for cover: attackers must roll a 12 or higher to strike a character or target that is partially covered. So they need to roll a 16 to strike a character who is behind full cover. Most cover that you're going to find going to be considered standard damage capacity. So like our homes now, well, anything on Earth right now is SDC or standard damage capacity. And then most ranged weapons in the modern world of Rift do mega damage capacity or MDC. So the cover acts more to obscure the target rather than to protect them. Cover can be defeated by using heat or thermal vision, those types of things. There's some races that actually have it as a standard thing. Some weapons that have it just standard. You might have it in your heads-up display in your body armor or power armor, etc. Next thing with basic rules is saving throws. Saves apply when dealing with magic, psionics, poisons, toxins, gases, those kinds of things. Players roll a d20 to save. When you die or you're really low on hit points, there's something called a coma death roll or save against coma death. And for that one, you roll a d100. A base of 12 is applied to save versus magic spells that require a save. So, players apply bonuses to save to their roll. So a roll value 12 or greater means a save from the effects of a magic spell have occurred, and you don't take either. Sometimes it's half damage, no effect. What just depends on the description of the spell. Rituals, however, do require a 16 or higher to save versus. And then some practitioners of magic, they do gain a bonus to their spell strength, meaning that it'll increase the save value, i.e. a 12 becomes a 13 or a 16 becomes a 17, etc. Now, when we're dealing with psionics and saves, non-psionics they have to roll a 15 or higher to save versus psionics. A minor or major psychic needs to roll a 12 or higher, and then a master psychic needs to roll a 10 or higher to save. There are some races, like Psi Stalkers, who are inherently immune to some psionic attacks or multiple types of psionic or all. And they just roll versus a 6 to save versus psionic attacks. And then non-lethal toxins and poisons are 16 or higher to save. Lethal toxins and poisons, 15 or higher to save. Harmful drugs, 15 or higher to save. Next thing so we talked a little bit about coma or death saves, but let's talk a little bit more about it. Coma and death saves are rarely applied or used when a character has suffered traumatic injuries that risks death. So bonuses are applied when a medical professional is using their skills to treat a character in a coma or dying. That's typically the situation you're gonna find when you use it. So when using MD surgery, like psychic surgery, or to a lesser extent paramedics, the skill rolls then made, adding the character's coma death save. And then percentages of survival are increased when the appropriate equipment is being used. Nanostitchers, clotters, presence of a proper medical facility with a team to apply them increases a critically injured character's chances of surviving death. Lost limbs and organs can be replaced with synthetic or bionic or cybernetic limbs and organs. Changing enough of a character's biological organs and limbs will change them from their regular OCC to a partial or full conversion cyborg, regardless of what they started as. And this is magic characters and psionic characters really want to try avoiding at all costs, because it'll either reduce their capabilities with those significantly, or if they become a full conversion cyborg, it'll negate them entirely. So,
and that concluded episode 1.